My name is Heather. It's hard to admit, but honestly, I've never had much confidence in my looks. However, I do believe I'm a friendly person. Some might say it's a bit late, but I was able to get married in my late 30s. I thought to myself, I can't believe someone like me could get married, but that happy life did not last long. Who would have thought it would turn out like this? I was a woman who was never popular since my childhood. I wasn't particularly cute and I didn't have any special talents that drew attention. I was just average in both academics and sports. I simply wasn't the type to stand out. I met my husband in a certain diner. It was located a little away from the town center, but it was a discreetly thriving place, a kind of hidden gem. I loved that diner and went there often. It was a family-run business, managed by an elderly couple and their son. I would go there alone for a meal at least once a week, and over time, I began to interact with other regular customers. Although I was a shy person, thanks to this place, I was able to become more sociable. To put it simply, the son of the diner's owner, a man named Robert, was the one who would become my future husband. Robert and I gradually became closer, and one day, he asked me out. "Are you sure about me? I'm not that cute, you know." I had never had any serious romantic relationships. I can't say I never had any men in my life, but when my friends talked about love, I felt left out. But Robert told me, "I think you're cute when you're smiling and chatting with the other customers in the diner." By that time, I was already 36 years old. I was always worried if an old lady like me was good enough, but Robert just kept complimenting me. Once I realized there was someone who thought of me that way, I began to fall for Robert too. So when he asked me to be his girlfriend, I had no reason to say no. I felt incredibly loved. From that moment, our relationship was on the track to marriage. Robert's parents, who were also the owners of the diner, spoke kindly to me. Then, I finally got a marriage proposal. I couldn't believe someone like me could end up in such a happy situation. It felt like I was about to float off the ground. However, I would soon realize that my elation was nothing more than a terrible misunderstanding. By the time Robert proposed to me, I was already 38. When we got married, Robert, who had been living with his parents, moved into a rental apartment with me. At first, I thought we might have to live with his parents. I was a bit hesitant about that, so I was really glad when Robert suggested otherwise. It's not that I disliked his parents, but after all, they were still strangers. However, there was something Robert discussed with me. "Heather, I want you to help with the diner." Apparently, running the diner with their current staff was quite a challenge. If his parents were still young, it would have been fine, but it seems their strength started to decline after they crossed 60. His parents seemed grateful that I would join the diner. But I had my own job, so when he asked, I was really conflicted. I work in an office administration job. As a shy person, I had never considered working in the service industry. So, the idea of working as a diner staff felt like a high hurdle for me. But Robert told me, "Heather, you can talk to the customers, just like you have been. That's all you need." Hearing him say that, I made up my mind. I decided to quit my office job and switch to working at Robert's family diner. My coworkers supported me, and I put my all into starting my new life as Robert's wife and a service staff member at the diner. Initially, I was very nervous, but once I got started, I got used to it quickly, thanks to the many familiar regular customers that Robert mentioned. Gradually, I became able to greet other new customers brightly, and slowly started to gain confidence. Every day I work, I realize how diverse our customers are. We have regulars who always come in with their subordinates and order a lot of food, groups who come here after enjoying a round of golf as a regular routine, and others. And these customers accept me, making comments like, "Oh? A new staff member? Did you hire someone?" Or, "Oh wow, you're Robert's wife. That's a surprise. You're quite a looker, aren't you?" Robert's parents even said, "It's nice that Robert got such a pretty wife. Robert, you're a lucky man." I was thrilled to be complimented as being pretty or cute, even if it was just flattery, as I had never received such compliments before. So that's how my work started to settle in. However, being a service staff at a diner is quite time-consuming. Since we are open for lunch, I usually arrive at the diner around 10 in the morning and leave to go home around 10 at night after dinner service. We do have one day off per week, but on that day, I have to do a considerable amount of housework. Actually, Robert's parents go home right after the last order is taken at night. So it's just us doing the cleanup, and I tend to feel tired after such days. At first, I managed to cook dinner for us when I got home, but it gradually became more difficult. I started to rely on supermarket ready-made meals more often. After all, Robert prefers to have a relaxed meal at home, so I think this is unavoidable. I thought that since we are a restaurant, we could just prepare and eat something simple at the diner before heading home. However, as the days went by, Robert began to talk less and less to me. Whether at work or while eating at home, he speaks only when necessary, and he's become rather curt. It's only been a little over a year since we got married, and he's stopped touching me altogether. I finally said to him, "Hey, you've been looking gloomy all the time. If you have something to say, why don't you just say it?" Then, Robert said simply, "Huh? Nothing in particular. Just thinking that we're always eating supermarket ready-made meals food." I was a bit taken aback by his response. But I, too, am doing all the housework, and I want to take some shortcuts when it comes to cooking. After all, I'm tired after a day's work. When Robert gets home, all he does is take a shower first and then have a beer. I was honestly irritated by his comment, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I suggested, "Well, why don't we use the diner's ingredients and take them home to cook?" But for some reason, Robert became disgruntled. "What? That means I'd end up cooking, since I'm in charge of the kitchen." That's how he snapped back at me. "Well, it's for us to eat, so I can help too." But even when I said that, Robert stayed silent and spoke even less than before. I didn't want to start a fight over this, but there are things I can't give up on. If I push myself to cook dinner here, it might affect my work at the diner. So I tried to cook as much as I could, and on my days off, I would make time to prepare meals, but otherwise, I tried not to think about it too much. However, since then, everyone's attitude towards me at work changed. When taking orders, Robert's parents and John, who used to cheerfully say thank you, now only respond with a listless okay. Also, when customers came to consult about the dishes, my in-laws and husband started to turn them down, which they never did before. Since I'm the one who has to tell the customers, it seems like Robert's parents and John don't care about the customers at all. "That's gonna take too much time. What's that person thinking, with other customers waiting? Heather, you should know better. Use your head." They even started shouting insults at me. I, who was taken aback, could only apologize. Yet, when it comes to things that customers tell my mother-in-law, my husband is all too eager to jump on it. Furthermore, when there are no customers around, Robert's mother suddenly started speaking to me from a position of superiority. "You're a wife now, you have to do proper wife things. You seem to be slacking." I didn't even have time to sleep back in my day. I guess she heard from Robert that I'm not cooking homemade meals for him. But it's not like I'm slacking off. "Excuse me, but I'm working as hard as I can, and it's not like I'm slacking off," I retorted, hoping my mother-in-law would understand. But she wouldn't have any of it. Instead, she would spitefully retort, "You're quite capable of arguing back, aren't you?" I feel sorry for Robert. Then my father-in-law stepped in and told me, "Robert is the heir to this shop, so you need to take care of him properly." I was on the verge of tears hearing that. Was I really deserving of such treatment? I kept questioning myself. Was I in the wrong? I'd rather believe it's them who are in the wrong. I'm starting to detest working in this restaurant. Despite the fact that many of our wonderful customers treat me well. Thinking about them, I don't want to quit. "Heather, you're doing great today. You're also pretty, so I couldn't help but come again." I never imagined there would be so many people saying such kind things to me in my life. But each time a customer spoke nicely to me, my mother-in-law would say to me, "Don't get carried away. There's no way someone like you could be called pretty." She had grown comfortable uttering such cutting remarks. Under such circumstances, the kind words of the customers became my only solace. Every day is a struggle over whether I should quit or somehow carve out a path for myself. One thing is certain, I no longer have any love for Robert. To put it bluntly, we're just living together like a couple in name only, and I've come to think of my in-laws as nothing less than devils. I've started to realize that the good first impressions everyone gave were nothing but deceptions. How long will this go on? As I spent each day contemplating this, the answer was led by Robert himself. As time passed, Robert suddenly started coming home late. While he used to come home with me in silence after cleaning up, recently, he's been letting me go home first, and he comes home about an hour later. Curious as to what he was up to, I asked him after a few days of this pattern. "Hey, you've been coming home late lately, what's up?" To which Robert replied, without looking at me, "It's nothing. I'm just eating dinner at my parents' place." And then went straight to take a bath. Upon hearing this unexpected answer, I felt a wave of emotion stronger than sadness or loneliness. It was anger and indignation. So, he preferred meals that someone else put effort into? I was filled with an unbearable feeling. I was sure that Robert no longer had any love for me. At the same time, I made a decision to quit the restaurant. It seemed that to Robert and his family, having someone to add to the numbers was more important than who the person was. They just wanted someone to continue the family business. In that case, it didn't have to be me, did it? But I guess because I'm a clumsy woman when it comes to love, it was easy for Robert to approach me. Thinking about it that way, there's no reason for us to be together. And so, I decided to act. The next day, I worked at the restaurant and as usual, I was scolded. But for me, it was just a matter of enduring until the opportunity arose. They likely didn't realize that I was just biding my time. But that opportunity came quickly. While I was casually chatting with an important customer as usual, I was called by my mother-in-law from the back. "You, always loafing around. Are you just getting carried away? You really need to realize how ugly you are," she said with an exasperated look. But I immediately responded, "But the customers like me. I was even told that they'd be in trouble if I quit." Upon my cheerful reply, my mother-in-law angrily retorted even more. "Huh? What are you saying? We don't care if you quit at any moment. We think you're just in the way, can't you see that? If you can quit, then do so. We're just employing you out of kindness." She spoke so confidently. Perhaps my mother-in-law doesn't think I will quit so easily. After all, if I quit, I would lose my income and finding a new job at my age would be difficult. And perhaps she thinks that I won't quit because I feel bad for my husband. Of course, that's what I was thinking. So I said to my mother-in-law, "Understood, I'm sorry. I spoke too much," and immediately got back to work. That made the most of my first opportunity. In the end, I kept working at the store as usual and my mother-in-law probably became confident that I couldn't quit. And before I knew it, I turned 40. On my birthday, I worked as usual, went home before my husband, and he came home after eating dinner at his parents' house. There wasn't a single word of birthday congratulations. Normally, you'd want to say something to a husband who doesn't even offer words of celebration on your birthday. But it's fine, it's okay. All I have to do now is wait for the time to come. But then Robert said something that completely trumped my thoughts. On my very own birthday, he announced out of the blue, "I'm going to move back in with my parents." After all, I just love my mom's cooking. I was taken aback, to say the least. Robert seemed to have no qualms about it whatsoever. But I quickly regained my composure and calmly replied, "Oh, is that so? I understand." From the next day on, Robert really didn't come home. I won't lie, I was surprised, but I reassessed the situation and thought it was just a matter of time and proceeded with my plan. I went to the restaurant as usual, talked with the customers as usual, and was berated by Robert and my mother-in-law as usual. Everything was the same. Except for these last 2 days. On the third day of living apart, I had a person constantly calling my phone. It was Robert. "Hey! What are you doing? Where are you? Of course, he would be surprised. I hadn't shown up at the restaurant even an hour after my usual starting time. Where am I? I'm at my parents' house. I had something to talk about with them, I answered honestly. Robert was furious. What are you talking about? Hurry up and come here. We're past the opening time. It was clear he was panicking. But I just said one thing. Huh? But your mom told me I could quit any time. I thought I'd agreed to that. With that, Robert seemed utterly thrown into confusion. I may have broken some rules, but it's true I was told I could quit any time. If I've broken the rules, so has my mother-in-law. But the real torment for Robert and the others was yet to come. When I stopped going to the restaurant, they must have thought they'd be super busy and short-handed. But it was quite the opposite. The customers suddenly stopped coming. The regulars who always came to the restaurant didn't show up at all that day. The place was much quieter than usual. They must have found this strange as it was quiet during both lunch and dinner. Nobody came, not even the daily regulars. Something must have felt off. Robert seems to have called one of the regulars to check. The customer then said, "Just by me not showing up for one day, you get the feeling something's off, huh? I really underestimated you. Not just you, but the restaurant as well. Even though you had such a wonderful wife, how could you treat her that way? I don't want to go to a place that treats a fellow worker so horribly. I doubt I'll ever go again, but good luck." Robert, completely shocked by this, shared the news with his parents and started calling various regular customers. But, as expected, everyone was saying the same thing. In reality, many customers had cared for me since I started working at the restaurant. You know, it feels like you've been looking tired lately. Is work being hard on you? You usually have such a lovely smile, but I've noticed that it's been less frequent lately. I was told this by many people. At first, I was dismissive, but I couldn't resist the warmth of everyone around me. I suppose I was reaching my limit too. So, I opened up about the things that were happening to me with Robert and his parents. Upon hearing this, my regulars were shocked. Really? That's horrendous. To think they were like that. No wonder we heard strange noises from the kitchen from time to time. We thought the place had improved significantly since you started working. If you were to quit, we wouldn't come here anymore. It's sad to see you leave, but if you've hit your limit, we understand. Just let us know. They all stood by my side. I couldn't stop crying. After receiving Robert's announcement of separation, I decided to quit. I wanted to say goodbye to my dear customers and to uphold my promise. I told them I was leaving. Everyone, from the regulars to those who spent a lot of money or brought many others with them. I just told my story honestly, and indeed, they stopped coming to the restaurant. This was certainly a heavy blow to the business. But it just goes to show how badly Robert and his parents treated me. The customers made that judgment. Only Robert and his parents failed to realize it. The next day, and the day after, Robert kept calling me. The number of customers had dwindled, and if this continued, the restaurant might need to close. I ignored his calls at first. After a week, I reluctantly picked up because I had something to say. "Please! I really am sorry. I want you to come back. I don't mind if you want to eat takeout from the supermarket, and if you're tired, you can take more days off." He was clearly begging me. However, I had no intention of returning to Robert. But I had one matter to settle, so I went to the restaurant during the midday break. His parents were there too, begging me to come back. "Heather, you can come back. You see, we're old." Robert also said, "You've come back. That's great." I did not return. "I just came to give you this. Take care," I said, handing him the business card of my divorce lawyer. "Hey, wait! Divorce? What do you mean?" Robert's panic was as if he had seen something beyond this world. But I didn't have the emotional energy to answer his question properly. "That's what I mean. If you refuse to accept it, you can prepare a lawyer or whatever is necessary." With that, I left the restaurant. I don't know if he heard my last words, but the divorce went through quickly, and I was thankfully freed from the oppressive control of Robert and his parents. Since then, all the talk about Robert's restaurant has been nothing but bad rumors. In fact, after a few months, the rumors themselves disappeared. There were whispers of unpaid bills to suppliers and landlords. People who spotted Robert and his parents said they looked gaunt as if they had eaten something bad. Well, they never bothered to understand my feelings. In return, I guess people no longer wanted to understand them. On the other hand, I started living in a new apartment. I became single again at this age, but I have the ability to communicate with a variety of people, so I should be fine. For now, I'm full of optimism and ready to enjoy my new life. They look like the very picture of happiness, don't they? I guess if we had kids, we might have had a family like that too. Daniel says, flashing a warm smile. His grin is soft, as though he's looking at something dearly beloved. At first glance, anyone might think Daniel, with that expression, is a gentle soul. But the reality is quite different. A small boy, surrounded by kind-looking parents, frolicking with joy. It's a shame for the kid, but I'm about to shatter their happiness. And I'm going to do it in the most terrible way. But all of this, every last bit, is Daniel's fault. If there's any blame, it should fall on Daniel, who betrayed me so cruelly. Their misery is all because of Daniel. My name is Betty Smith, a 43-year-old homemaker. I live with my husband, Daniel. I met Daniel through a friend. At the time, I wasn't particularly interested in romance, but Daniel proactively asked me out on dates. Gradually, I started to have feelings for Daniel and we started dating, which led to our marriage. We never had kids. It wasn't a fertility issue or anything. Daniel was always busy with work and was frequently away from home from the start of our marriage. With his frequent business trips and him being gone for days, we just didn't have much time to spend as a couple. Sure, if we had kids, we could have experienced the happiness that comes with an expanded family. But we were perfectly happy with just the two of us. Even without children, being able to live with the person I love most. It was more than enough to make me happy. I believe Daniel felt the same. But at the same time, I had my doubts. I didn't want to suspect Daniel, but he was indeed always busy. Another business trip? This is the third one this month, right? And this time you're going to be gone for a week? That day, when Daniel returned from work, he told me he had another business trip scheduled. From what I could gather, he had to travel far this time, requiring a flight, and it seemed he wouldn't be able to return for about a week. This was already his third trip this month. Sure, work can be busy, but there are limits. What's more, he's been working overtime daily, to the point where we, as a married couple, barely have the chance to see each other. Daniel, it's really odd that you're this busy. Isn't your company one of those infamous black companies? Maybe you should consider a job change. We could manage our finances for a month or two. I'm worried your health might give in at this rate. Not only daily overtime, but also frequent business trips. Clearly, Daniel's company is not normal. At this rate, Daniel might break down. As his wife, I feel it's my duty to do something about this. With this feeling, I tried to persuade Daniel. No, I'm okay. Work is tough, sure, but it's also rewarding. I'm sorry for being away so much, it must have been lonely. But, working is important for our life together, Betty. Daniel replied with a troubled smile. Indeed, having a job is essential for making a living. But does that mean there has to be a reason to push ourselves this hard? I started to question Daniel's words and the company he works for. Am I wrong? Is Daniel's way of thinking just common? Do I really have to continue my current job to support our household? In the end, no matter how much I try to persuade him, Daniel has no intention of changing jobs, so nothing changes and we continue to live our lives. As usual, our intimacy as a couple is quite minimal. I'm happy if we sleep in the same bed once a week. It's been this way since we got married. I'm sure the reason why we don't have children is because of that. In the midst of this, Daniel happened to have a day off, so we traveled a bit and came to a shopping mall in the neighboring town. Due to the holiday, there were many families, and every time I saw children happily holding their parents' hands, I couldn't help but sigh, wishing we could be like that too. Seeing me like this, Daniel made a face. "Stop sighing, it's our day off. Why don't we go eat instead?" Looking at the time, it was indeed lunchtime. We decided to go to a nearby diner after discussing it. As it was lunchtime on a holiday, there were many people. Sure enough, there were many families inside. A child, excited looking at the kids' menu. A child smiling, being fed a hamburger by a woman who seemed to be his mother. Every time I saw such happy family scenes, I couldn't help but think about why we don't have children, and all the unpleasant thoughts came to mind. I wondered if Daniel was thinking the same, as he quietly muttered while watching the families. "Kids are cute and wonderful. I wonder what kind of child we would have had." Those words hit me hard. I might be taking it too pessimistically, but it felt like a jab at me for not being able to have children. I wanted children too. I wanted to give birth to a child with Daniel and build a happy family. All of this is because Daniel's job is too demanding. If he had considered changing his job earlier, creating even a little time for us, we might have become a happy family like those people. With those thoughts, I sighed at my own negative thinking. It's not Daniel's fault. Daniel is just working hard for us to live happily. Despite all that, look at what I'm thinking. Maybe I was so fed up with my own thoughts that the food brought to us didn't taste good. I felt like Daniel was looking at me with a displeased face. In the end, I couldn't even enjoy the rare outing with Daniel that day. Since that time, my relationship with Daniel became strained. There was something I felt towards our child, and unconsciously I started to distance myself from Daniel, but I had a feeling that Daniel was also somewhat avoiding me. I knew this couldn't continue, but I had no idea what to do. Because I didn't understand why things had turned out this way. Even when I tried to think it through on my own, I couldn't find an answer, so I decided to consult a friend who I'd known since my school days about the situation. My friend listened to my story sincerely. And, empathizing with my words, they reassured me. "Betty, you're doing your best." But even so, I didn't feel any better. Seeing me like this, my friend looked somewhat puzzled, prefaced their words with, "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but..." And then told me something. That revelation left me feeling dizzy. I couldn't believe it. If that was true, then Daniel. From the day I talked with my friend, I started to distance myself from Daniel. My friend's words kept echoing in my mind. A few days later, during the day, I was walking through the residential neighborhood with Daniel. Suddenly, I said, "I want to go for a walk." And though Daniel looked surprised, I was relieved that he agreed to join me. We passed by a certain house. We could see the yard of the house. There, a happy family was having a barbecue. A little boy was playing cheerfully, surrounded by a man and woman who looked like his parents. Seeing this scene, Daniel murmured, "That's like a picture-perfect family. Maybe if we had a child, we could have been a family like that." Towards the joyful family, Daniel cast a loving gaze. At first glance, one might perceive Daniel as a kind person. But the reality is different. Daniel and this family are irreversibly connected. That happy scene is undeniable proof of Daniel's cruel betrayal. That's why I had brought him near this house today. I watched Daniel to see if he showed any remorse, but it seemed he had none. If so, then no one would blame me for dragging him through hell. The child is innocent, but all of this is Daniel's fault. If there's someone to resent, it's Daniel. I made up my mind to punish the traitors. Yes, that may be so. But because of you, they're going to be miserable. I say, gazing at the family playing happily in the distance. At my words, Daniel tilted his head as if to say, "What are you talking about?" And muttered, "Huh?" He seems to be playing dumb, even at this point. What the hell is going on? They and I have nothing to do with each other, right? Sure, I must look like a weirdo for bringing this up out of the blue. But I don't intend to send innocent people to hell. It's because there's a connection that they're sent to hell. There was a tremor in Daniel's voice, or so it seemed to me. From Daniel's point of view, he wouldn't have expected me to say such a thing all of a sudden. Because there's no way his actions so far have been exposed. I was truly underestimated. Well, who knows? Let's just go home for today. We have no more business here, I said, taking Daniel's hand and starting our way home. Daniel, looking uneasy at my behavior, kept saying things like, "What the hell is going on?" and "Why won't you talk to me?" But I didn't answer. The old me would have consulted with Daniel right away if I had a problem. Daniel was a dependable husband to that extent. Well, now I realize that was just to keep up the appearances of being a married couple. When I got home, I didn't talk much, just had some dinner and then shut myself in my room. Daniel, looking anxious the entire time, kept glancing at me, but I pretended not to notice. Late that night, I quietly left the house. Daniel was sound asleep, so he probably didn't notice me going out. I slipped an envelope into a mailbox at a certain house. That envelope was my trump card. I'm sure the owner of this house will be surprised when they see the trump card I've prepared the next morning. All of this is the fault of the traitor. I've just decided to punish the one who betrayed me. If there had been no betrayal, none of this would have happened. Happiness wouldn't have been destroyed. With each step I take, I feel a tightening in my chest as I realize I've come too far to turn back. I can't pretend none of this happened. I can't go back. The next morning, Daniel and I were having breakfast together. It was Sunday, but Daniel had plans to be out of the house for work as usual. Just then, the doorbell rang. Who could it be, this early in the morning? Daniel, suspicious, got up from his seat to check the doorbell monitor. Then, the sight that spread before him made Daniel exclaim, "Why?" The people on the screen were the couple from the house we had visited the day before. A man, presumably the husband, his face red, spoke through the intercom. "Sorry for disturbing you so early in the morning. We have something to discuss, could we come in?" Watching the man, the woman turned pale, exclaiming, "Oh, hold on, please stop. Let's go home. We can't trouble these people." Apparently, it was the man's decision to come to our house, and the woman seemed to have followed him, trying to stop him somehow. "Why are they here? What's going on?" Why had they come to our house? In Daniel's mind, it seemed like their visit to our house was not a good thing. While nodding in agreement, I opened the front door. "You saw that envelope, didn't you? Please come in. Let's talk face to face." As I said that envelope, the man's eyes widened. Yes, it was their house that I had slipped the envelope into late at night. When I invited the two of them into our house, Daniel turned ashen as if flustered. Ignoring Daniel, I made the couple sit down and served them tea. Daniel, who could not digest the situation, kept saying, "Why?" The woman, who was eager to go home. And the man, looking at both of them alternately, his eyes full of determination. The cast was now properly gathered here. It was time for the revelation. "You came here because you saw this picture, didn't you?" I said, laying out the contents of the envelope I had taken out of the cupboard onto the table. The inside of the envelope were the same as what I had put into their mailbox last night. There were a lot of pictures. In each picture, Daniel and the woman were walking arm in arm in the city at night, looking very friendly. Yes, they were having an affair. The reason I knew this was because one day, when I was talking to a friend, she told me, "I saw Daniel walking arm in arm with a woman in the city at night." At first, I couldn't believe what she said. That night, while Daniel was in the bath, I checked his smartphone that he had left in the living room. His password was so careless that even I could easily see what was inside. There were text exchanges with a certain woman. It seems that the two of them have known each other since their student days and apparently were close even before I started dating him. They seem to have drifted apart upon starting their careers, but they happened to reunite at a class reunion and apparently started dating from there. In other words, while he was in a relationship and even married to me, he was fooling around with another woman. This is unforgivable. With this thought, I hired a private investigator to track their movements. Then, the evidence started piling up. Moreover, she had a child. By calculating backwards from the time the child was born, it was discovered that the likely conception period coincided with a week-long trip the two had taken. All this while, I had believed Daniel's absences were due to his busy work schedule. But that was a lie. It seemed he was simply spending time with her, coming home late and frequently going on business trips. She, like Daniel, probably used the excuse of being busy with work to spend time with him, all to avoid arousing suspicion from her husband. This means, the child Daniel once looked upon so affectionately was his and her child. When I explained all this in my own words, the man's face turned beet red and he grabbed the woman by the collar.
"It's not like that. Everything she's saying is a lie. That child is yours, there's no doubt,"
the woman shouted out in desperation. But the presence of the photographs made it clear, at least the infidelity was a fact. The man's anger did not easily dissipate.
"I'm divorcing you. Be prepared,"
the man declared loudly. The woman was sobbing, pleading.
"Wait.
And
It's not like that."
And I let out a sigh, wondering what she thought was wrong. As I watched their dispute, I casually glanced at Daniel and noticed him breaking out in cold sweat, perhaps feeling apprehensive about the upcoming events. Of course, it wasn't just her who was at fault for the affair. Daniel too needed to face his consequences. It seemed the man was somewhat satisfied with demanding a divorce. His face still held the traces of anger, but he said nothing more and took his seat. It was as if he was passing the baton to me.
"Of course, Daniel, you will face appropriate consequences too, okay? Your actions are a clear act of betrayal. And you've been fooling me for years,"
I said, smiling slyly. When I first discovered Daniel's betrayal, I struggled to accept the reality and prayed again and again that it was just a dream, but once things started to progress, I didn't feel that way anymore, and all I could think about was sending Daniel straight to hell. My words made Daniel's face turn pale and he fell to his knees.
"Please, forgive me. I admit that I was involved with her, but it's you that I truly love. That's why even when she had a child, I didn't divorce you, and I wanted us to stay together as a couple. I would have been fine just being with you, even if we didn't have a child."
Suddenly, Daniel started saying things that were all too convenient. At that, Daniel's words made a woman's face turn beet red as she lunged at him, exclaiming,
"What's that supposed to mean?"
Ignoring her, Daniel continued.
"It was all just a fling with her. I was just under a spell. The only one I truly love is you, Betty. I don't care about the kid or her. As long as I'm with you, that's all that matters."
Normally, being told by your loved one that you're all they need would be something to rejoice about. But I couldn't believe Daniel's words anymore. After all, there was a time when Daniel undoubtedly looked at that boy with love. Because he clearly felt affection for that child.
"You say you don't care about the kid, but that's a lie. You've been talking about having children for a while now. You've always wanted a child, haven't you?"
You wouldn't make a face like that if you didn't want a child. You wouldn't say something like, "We're a picture-perfect family." For Daniel, having a child might symbolize happiness. But there's no child between us. Because Daniel has been prioritizing his time with his mistress over me for a long time.
"I really don't care about the kid. I don't care about her either. All I need is you. Please, believe me."
No matter what I say, Daniel keeps desperately denying it. He really doesn't want to divorce. If we divorce, it will leave a mark on his record, and if his parents-in-law find out, they'll definitely be furious. They hate dishonesty, so if this comes out, they'll surely give Daniel a good talking to. They might even disown him. "It's impossible, I can't believe you. Who's been betraying me for years, having an affair behind my back? Who's been disregarding my trust, my feelings? And yet, you didn't want to have a child with me, but you had a child with your mistress without a second thought. There's no way I could believe you after all that. Let's divorce. I can't continue as a married couple with you anymore," I told him clearly. At my words, Daniel looked desperate. If it had been the old me, it would have taken a lot of courage to even mention the word divorce. Because I loved Daniel that much. Despite knowing that, Daniel cruelly betrayed me. That crime shouldn't be forgiven so easily. On top of that, Daniel is trying to neglect even the child who undoubtedly carries his blood. If Daniel hadn't acted so irresponsibly, none of this would have happened. But to even abandon his child to protect himself is unthinkable. Daniel has to take the minimum responsibility as an adult. That's why I can't forgive Daniel here. Rather, I need to punish him and make him face his sins. And make sure he never disregards people's feelings again. The woman he cheated with, her face red with anger, was sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel, shaking off the woman's arm, threw himself at my feet in desperation. Desperately trying to hold on to me, he clung to my feet. Sighing heavily at the sight, I saw Daniel's shoulders shake. But even seeing him like that, I didn't feel the slightest inclination to forgive Daniel. Afterwards, we decided to divorce. Daniel was very reluctant, and we even had to go through divorce mediation. We had plenty of evidence of the affair, so the divorce was granted on the grounds of Daniel's responsibility. Then, I demanded property division from Daniel. Of course, Daniel's parents-in-law heard about the situation, and they were furious. They wouldn't even let him cross their threshold. He's now working day and night to pay for child support. The woman he cheated with was also served with divorce papers and apparently returned to her parents' house with her child. According to her husband, her parents are furious and she's going to be working like a horse with no time for leisure while they're around. Thus, we were able to properly punish Daniel for his terrible betrayal. To be frank, there were plenty of things that stressed me out, and I felt quite worn out. Nonetheless, I felt a sense of relief having been able to administer divine retribution for the betrayal that persisted for so many years. Since then, I've moved and have been living peacefully in a new place. I still meet up often with the friend who helped me during that time, enough to chat about how tough it was back then. Having experienced such a harsh betrayal, I've had enough of married life for a while. I guess I'll be living on my own for a bit. It's my life, after all, so I've started to think that's okay. From now on, I want to live for myself.
I can't stand you. Not your attitude, not your words, none of it.
Ever since I became pregnant with our second daughter, Joan, my mother-in-law, has somehow adopted a confrontational demeanor. I couldn't hide my surprise at the drastic change. But that's another issue entirely. I couldn't suppress my anger, thinking about our home being left in shambles. And to involve our eldest daughter. Unforgivable as a parent. Absolutely, I won't forgive. Am I just supposed to stay quiet after all that's been done?
I'm going to teach Joan a lesson.
I made up my mind. My name is Alice Stevens, 35 years old. I'm a full-time homemaker. Married for 10 years, my husband, Thomas, and I lead a peaceful life. We have a 7-year-old daughter. Her name is Mia. She's a real sweetheart, our pride and joy. Just a little while ago she was going to kindergarten, but now I'm dropping off my daughter, who's become an elementary school student, at school again today.
Take care, sweetie.
Mia, living her life happily, had been giving me strength without me even realizing it. Indeed, children grow up incredibly fast. One day she'll become an adult before I know it. Thinking about her having a boyfriend, getting married, and leaving our home makes me sad, but if that's the path Mia chooses, I won't stop her. Although I ponder such things, when I think about it calmly, Mia is still only 7. We still have plenty of time together. I decided to fill that time with as much love as possible. Since we don't have many children in our family, Mia has always been the center of affection. Joan, my mother-in-law, was one of those who adored her. Alice, how's Mia doing?
She's doing great.
Is she using the notebook I got her?
Yes, she loves it.
A week ago, Joan bought a notebook for Mia. When I told her that Mia was enjoying it, Joan seemed delighted. My father-in-law passed away a few years ago. Living alone in her house must be lonely. That's probably why every time she sees me, Joan always asks about Mia and Thomas. Talked to my mother-in-law today. She was asking about you and Mia.
That's just like her.
Thomas seemed pleased when I told him about the conversation with Joan. That was a few months ago. A new change had come about in our family. Unbelievably, we were having another child. This came to be a few weeks after Mia turned 8. From the examination results, we found out it was a girl. When we broke the news to the kids during dinner, Mia stopped eating, her eyes sparkling.
A little sister? Yes, Mia, you're gonna be a big sister.
When I said that, Mia was overjoyed, raising her arms in celebration. Seeing this, Thomas too seemed delighted.
A girl. That's awesome.
Whether it was a boy or a girl didn't matter one bit. We were just happy to welcome another life into our family. That day, the conversation revolved around this new life. Mia was especially excited about becoming a big sister. We spent the evening imagining what it would be like once our family grew to 4, places we would like to visit, things we would like to do. The next day, I decided to visit Joan, who had always been good to us, and tell her about our new child. When I arrived, Joan greeted me with a warm smile.
So, you're having another baby. Congratulations.
Thank you. Joan blessed us with a beaming smile.
So, is it a boy?
It's a girl. I was certain that Joan would be thrilled. I figured she would shower the new baby with love, just like she did with Mia. I was excited to see her reaction. But to my surprise, Joan's face fell into a clear frown. Oh, I see, a girl. I was taken aback by her upset attitude. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Just as I was about to break the silence, I actually had something to do. Okay, you should go, you should go. Unexpectedly, she asked me to leave. I was so taken aback that I left without being able to ask why she had turned upset. Was it something I said? That was the only thing that crossed my mind. Could she have been upset about the baby's gender? No, that couldn't be it. After all, Mia is a girl too and Joan adores her. Could the problem lie with me then? On the drive back home, I kept wondering what might have upset Joan. I came home with a heavy heart and began doing my chores. In the afternoon, I went to pick up Mia from school. How was school? What did you do today? I asked my usual questions. Usually, Mia would react with joy, but today was different. She stared at my face. Then, she said simply,
Mom, you don't seem well today.
Mia then placed her hand on my head. I wondered if she was imitating me. Yet, I was impressed. She observes people so well. I tried not to show my troubled mood, but it seemed like Mia had seen right through me. I hugged Mia and stroked her head. Fast forward about 2 months. There was another change in our family. Surprisingly, Joan wants to live with us. The reason was because I was pregnant and she wanted to help with household chores and taking care of Mia. There had been an awkward silence since the day I announced the gender of the baby, but her offer to move in and help lightened my mood. I wasn't disliked after all. I was hopeful that living together with Joan would deepen our bond. I was harboring such faint hopes. Originally, Thomas had a good relationship with Joan, so he seemed happy about the idea of living with his mother again after so long. If Joan and I didn't get along, it would surely trouble Thomas. I steeled myself and began preparations to live with Joan. But, my hopes did not come true. Joan seemed to harbor some resentment towards me. Since we started living together, her demeanor had been rather cold, and she would pull faces at the meals I cooked and the chores I did. She had initially said she wanted to help with the chores, but since we started living together, she hadn't lifted a finger. She just kept bossing me around.
What's with this food? It's too plain. I wonder how Thomas puts up with this kind of food. I bet he has a complaint or two.
If you say so. I have never received a complaint from Thomas. But maybe it wouldn't be strange if he had some complaints. As I thought about the meals I've prepared so far, Joan smirked and spat out these words. Maybe he's got another woman on the side, you never know. Even as a joke, I didn't want to hear such things. Thomas would be fine. I believed that, but when I heard it out loud, I was taken aback. Seeing me downcast, Joan just laughed even more. And to add insult to injury, Joan told me,
"A woman like you will be dumped sooner or later. Just be prepared."
She then proceeded to eat the meal I'd prepared, which she'd said smelt of poverty. She was clearly making faces as if it tasted awful. I wish she wouldn't bother eating it if she's going to be like that. I could painfully feel my mental state being chipped away by Joan's words and actions. Fortunately, Joan was very kind to Mia. Mia seemed to be fond of her, which was a relief. But I couldn't shake off the suspicion that Joan might be doing something to Mia when I wasn't around. I found myself harboring such doubts. I had subtly asked Mia what kind of conversations she was having with Joan. But Mia seemed to enjoy talking about school and study, things like that. Complicating matters, Joan played the role of the good mother-in-law in front of Thomas. "Alice dear, is there anything bothering you? Please feel free to talk to me about anything."
"Thank you."
Without any proof, opposing her here would only be disadvantageous. I managed to force a smile and listen to Joan's talk. However, 4 months after we started living together, my belly was getting bigger, and honestly, I was getting tired of dealing with Joan. If I felt ill and fell asleep on the sofa, she'd wake me up and scold me for not doing housework. When I couldn't serve a decent meal because I couldn't stand the smell of food, she would bring up her own pregnancy and tell me how incompetent I was as a wife. I was fed up with this life. I knew it was late, but I made up my mind and decided to consult Thomas.
Can we talk a little about your mom?"
"Mom? What's up?" I told Thomas how Joan had been treating me. It was painful to remember everything that had happened so far.
"I didn't realize that.
I'm really sorry." Thomas believed what I said. And then he told me a surprising fact.
Actually, Mom has always been stubborn, or should I say bad-tempered. If something doesn't go her way, she gets upset right away. I hadn't noticed because it hadn't happened lately, and I'd let my guard down. I'll talk to her."
I hadn't imagined that Joan had such a personality. With my tired mind, I thanked Thomas. But Joan's attitude did not change. In fact, it might have gotten worse than before. The frequency of her ordering me around increased, and lately, she even stopped making her own drinks.
"Joan, can't you at least make your own drink?"
"Shut up. Don't give me orders. I don't care if you're pregnant or what, you're a housewife, and it's only natural for you to do everything around the house. When I was pregnant." And so began Joan's self-praise. "You and I are different people, so our hardships must be different too." I wanted to tell her off, but I just didn't have the energy. I continued to listen to Joan's story so as not to upset her. Living that way, I had a strong ally besides Thomas. That ally was Mia. It seemed Mia could sense my mood. It was astonishing how perceptive she was for an 8-year-old. Of course, I was aware of how unfair it was to make a child worry about me, and I felt guilty. But I couldn't bring myself to cheer up. That's when Mia spoke up.
"Mom, are you okay? You seem down."
"Do I?"
"Yeah, you're not smiling at all."
It seemed she sensed something from my facial expressions and my mood. I apologized for making her worry, but Mia, with a smile on her face, said,
"I'll protect you if anything happens, Mom. You don't have to worry about anything."
When did she grow up to be such a reliable kid? While I was happy as a parent, I also had mixed feelings. After that, Mia began to look after me more. Mia had begun to keep her distance from Joan. Perhaps she'd witnessed Joan shouting at me. Joan tried to win Mia over, but when she couldn't control her as she wished, Joan started acting cold towards Mia. What kind of adult does that? Such a selfish person. I was disgusted, but if Joan ever harmed Mia, it would be too late. I began to pay more attention to Mia.
"Mom, are you okay? Tired? I can help you with the dishes."
After that, Mia began to help out even more.
"Thanks for your help." "Well, you're pregnant. It looks hard."
Mia happily picked up the dishes from the drying rack and started wiping them. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Joan's face looking very displeased. She probably didn't like that we were helping each other. I didn't care. If she had something to say, she should just say it with her usual gusto. I thought about this as I worked with Mia. Several months later. My due date was approaching. When I gave birth to Mia, there were no particular issues, but this time, due to the stress, I was not feeling well and had to be hospitalized early. The one I was worried about was Mia. If she were to be victimized by Joan while I was away, it would be unbearable. After some thought, I came up with a plan. The plan was to have Mia come to the hospital after school. It might be a burden on her, but luckily, the school and the hospital are within a reasonable walking distance. If Thomas could pick her up after work, both Mia and I would feel at ease. After all, there would be no issue with Joan being home alone. She should be doing whatever she likes. I proposed to Thomas and Mia, and both of them agreed. 1 week after the proposal. Finally, the day of my hospitalization arrived.
Mama, I'm coming to visit you.
Thank you, I'll be waiting. I sent Mia off as usual and started making the final preparations to go to the hospital. Joan, who had been watching, seemed grumpy as always, but today she seemed somewhat happy.
Finally, the day has come. I wish you would just not come back.
Say whatever you want. This hospitalization was brought forward because of you, you know.
Huh? I haven't done anything, have I?
The stress at home caused my health to deteriorate. It's all because you keep complaining. Knowing that I won't see her for a while, I vented all the things I had been holding back.
I'm the one complaining. I haven't said anything. When I was pregnant.
I'm tired of that story. Tell it to someone else.
You're an ungrateful woman. You should listen to what I say.
I ignored Joan's rant and continued with my preparations. Eventually, even Joan, who had been making a fuss, seemed to realize it was futile and disappeared without a trace. When I looked at the clock, it was almost noon. I grabbed my bag in a hurry and headed to the hospital. Life became quite comfortable after being hospitalized. I didn't have to hear any complaints from anyone and didn't have to do any housework. Although I was worried about giving birth, it was far better than my usual life. Once I give birth, Joan will probably leave in a hurry. No, it would be a problem if she doesn't leave. I need to discuss with Thomas and somehow create some distance. I really want to get back to living just with my family. I was absent-mindedly thinking about this on my hospital bed. At that time, I saw a short shadow in the ward. It was Mia.
Mama, I'm here.
Welcome, have a seat. Mia happily took a seat. Then, she slowly took out a piece of paper from her backpack.
What's this? So cute. I drew this today. It's a picture of you and the baby that's gonna be born.
Mia must be really looking forward to the baby. I couldn't help but appreciate Mia, who had drawn such a cute picture.
Thank you, it's really good. I feel better.
Perhaps because she was praised, Mia was unusually shy. But honestly, she's really good. I can't help but think Mia has many talents. Is that just parental bias? Mia took out some worksheets and a pencil case from her backpack, and began to do her homework. Several hours later. It was about the time it got dark outside. Thomas came to my hospital room. After a brief chat with Thomas, he and Mia left for home. I heard Joan has been quiet recently. Apparently, she's still looking grumpy with her brows furrowed all the time. They laughed, saying that no one approaches her. About a week of living like that passed. Finally, it was time to give birth. I was extremely anxious, but before I knew it, I was put under anesthesia, and when I woke up, the baby was born. Thomas and Mia were in the hospital room with the baby. They both looked happy that I had woken up. Our new life is about to start. I couldn't contain my excitement. The baby was so cute.
Really? I can't wait to see him.
Since I can't move yet, meeting my baby face to face will have to wait. She must be adorable. Looking forward to that, I awaited the day. 10 days after giving birth. I was able to be discharged from the hospital without any issues. On the day of discharge, Thomas came to pick me up. With his support, I got into the car with the baby.
Are you okay? Can I start the car?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks. As the car Thomas was driving swayed, we headed home. Starting a new life is great, but there were things that made me anxious. That would be Joan. She must be at home. I don't expect her to love the baby unconditionally. I have to do everything I can to protect this child. As I was thinking about various things, we arrived home and opened the door. I'm home. But something felt off. There was no sign of anyone. And the living room, which could be seen from here, seemed a bit more spacious than before. Thomas also seemed to feel a bit strange, and as we cautiously peeked into the living room, our house was entirely empty.
What's going on?
This is. Baffled at first, we quickly guessed who could have done this. It must have been Joan. This did my mother-in-law.
My mom!
What should we do first? We should contact Joan, but I felt the need to get in touch with Mia first. I immediately texted Mia.
Where are you now?
No response came for a while. I was worried, but then I realized she would be in school right now. There had been no word of her missing school, so she should be in a situation where she can't access her phone.
Mia's at school.
Ah, right, of course. We were both too anxious. The lack of response was understandable. Just then, our phone chimed with a notification. The sender was, to our surprise, Mia. Who are you?
I don't have a mom. What?
What? Thomas, who had been looking at the screen with me, also blurted out in surprise. What on earth is happening? An unexpected reply from Mia, saying she had no mother. Everything was strange. We tried to call her quickly, but she didn't pick up. The only message we got from Mia was, "Don't call me. I'm selling that house. My grandmother says you should leave as soon as possible. We need to go to her house right now and confront my mom." We quickly got ready and headed towards Joan's house. When we arrived and Thomas rang the doorbell, Joan came out immediately. What's the rush?
Mom, what's the deal with our house?
What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb. You also used Mia's phone without her permission, didn't you?
Joan continued to feign ignorance. In her right hand, Joan firmly grasped Mia's cell phone. Joan, that's Mia's phone, isn't it? Why do you have it? I'm just holding on to it. Well, can we take a look then? If you're just holding on to it, you shouldn't have sent any messages. You know, we got a message from Mia's phone just a while ago. As I pressed her, Joan gradually started to frown. Anyways, let's get inside. We can talk about it there. When Thomas said so, Joan, who seemed to have given up, led us into the room. We sat on the sofa and started to inquire about the room and Mia. But Joan remained silent. She carelessly threw Mia's cell phone and started to cross her legs.
How many times have I told you not to mess with Alice and Mia? Between that and the mysterious message from Mia, I can only think that you're up to something, Joan. Yes, that includes your current attitude. Whenever things don't go your way, you get in a foul mood, just like you always have. It's embarrassing. Just stop it. Embarrassing.
In the end, the conversation was at a standstill. It wasn't Thomas who was in the wrong. It was Joan, who refused to say anything. Out of frustration, I intervened. How long are you going to act like a child? You really are immature. I bet a newborn could communicate better than you. Don't you get it? We're saying that we know you're up to something from the moment you sent that weird message with Mia's phone. I didn't give Joan a chance to talk back, and I said things that tore at her pride. Joan, who fell right into it, openly showed her anger.
Childish? Me? What are you talking about? Yes, I used Mia's phone to send the message and I even cleared out the house. I wanted to teach you a harsh lesson.
At Joan's sudden change, I couldn't help but furrow my eyebrows. Then, Joan continued her rant.
Listen, the whole problem is that you only give birth to girls. I wanted a son to carry on the Joan family name. And Thomas, how dare you lecture your mother? I didn't do anything wrong. It's all Alice's fault for not being able to do anything.
That's when it all clicked. Ever since I announced my second pregnancy, she was in a foul mood, and she had a short temper because I didn't give birth to a boy.
No, it's not Alice's fault. It's all because of you, Mom. You!
Joan, having been harshly criticized by her own son, was becoming redder with anger.
Do you even understand how shameful your actions are? I've been saying it, haven't I? I did nothing wrong.
As usual, Joan didn't bend her opinion. Thomas, after a moment of thought, looked straight at Joan and said,
All right, if that's what you're going to say, then I have something to say too. What is it? Spit it out.
I'm cutting ties with you, Mom.
Ties?
The moment she heard Thomas's words, Joan's complexion noticeably changed. She probably didn't expect her own son to cut ties with her.
Wait a minute. Please reconsider.
After all the havoc you've wreaked on our family, you've got some nerve. I won't change my mind. I'll make sure our relatives know just how terrible a person you are too.
No way. Hold on a minute.
And what happened to our furniture at home? Indeed, where did all the furniture go? There was quite a lot of it, and it couldn't possibly have been managed by Joan alone. I gave all the furniture to the junk removal service. I wanted to upset you, but I only wanted to annoy you a little.
What were you thinking? You probably used Dad's inheritance to do this. It's unfair to Dad to hire such services.
Indeed, he would not have wanted what he left behind to be used for such spite. I can't help but feel Joan is childish. Then give us the money to replace the furniture, Mom. It's not our fault.
I can't. Replacing furniture.
You sold the furniture to the service on your own, right? We don't need to spend our money. Please listen to my last request. As Thomas implored, Joan dropped her gaze, looking utterly dejected. After that, Joan replaced the furniture, they severed ties, and the matter was resolved. Having lost her connection to Thomas, Joan reportedly lost all her spirits. According to a relative who visited her after hearing Thomas's story, her atmosphere was entirely different from before. That relative said, "She was always quite stubborn. Maybe she learned her lesson this time?" So even relatives perceived her that way. Hopefully, this will prompt her to reconsider how she lives her life. Our family is living happily in the house we have been living in. We will no longer be bothered by Joan. We're able to fully engage with our family, and it's fulfilling. Mia watches over the baby with concern, which is adorable. She seems to want to play with them soon. Right. That's what a warm family is. Through this incident, I felt the kindness and reliability of Thomas and Mia. How much have these two supported me? I want to give my all to repay them from now on.
I married you to take care of her, remember? My husband said with a smirk as he lugged a massive black suitcase behind him and stepped out through the front door, leaving his bedridden mother and me behind. He was off to Hawaii with a skip in his step. I couldn't believe he was going on a vacation, leaving his ailing mother. Although he was never the most considerate man, this was a new law that left me speechless. I swore to myself he'd pay. At that moment, my mother-in-law stood up with a smile and said, "Let's go us two." I was so taken aback, I didn't know how to respond. "Go where?" I managed to ask. She just grinned back at me and twinkled in her eye. "My name's Susan. I'm 42. I met my husband at work. We became close after many shared coffee breaks and got married when I was 33. I quit the job after marriage. Since then, I've been working part-time at the daycare center, using my degree in early childhood education to contribute to our household expenses, all while managing the house. Both my parents are no longer here. Both of my parents passed away from cancer. It happened when I was 30. My father passed first, and my mother followed soon after. I've been pouring all the love they left behind into my mother-in-law and the kids at the daycare. My mother-in-law treats me with such kindness. That alone makes my marriage to my husband worthwhile. I truly love her. Sadly, we've been unable to have children, and now I'm this old. It's really heartbreaking that I can't show her the face of her grandchild. I feel really sorry about it. Moreover, my husband tended to vent his frustration on her, which fills me with guilt. Why can't my husband cherish his own blood-related parent? Although his behavior toward her at home is appearing, he takes good care of her in public, which stops me from getting angry at him. To make up for it, I rented an apartment about a 15-minute drive from her house, so I can easily check up on her living alone. It was during one of those days when I was doing housework after finishing my job. My cell phone rang. It was from my husband, who should have been at work. Hello? What happened? When I answered, I could hear the distress in my husband's voice. Well, according to him, my sprightly mother-in-law had fallen and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I was shocked and worried. She was such an active, healthy woman. She is at the hospital right now, but I can leave work. Could you go to the hospital instead? He asked. I agreed immediately, and after taking off my apron, I rushed to the hospital he had mentioned. Upon reaching, I found my mother-in-law lying there, dressed in a patient gown. I'm sorry you had to come. It would have been better if John was here. Seeing the genuine regrets on my mother-in-law's face, I was flustered. Don't apologize. You are like my real mother. It's only natural for your daughter to come. You always put me in your debt, Susan. Thank you. Her normally vibrant smile was dimmed. It was sad to see her so unlike herself. From what I gathered, she had been knocked over by a large man on the street and had fallen down. I heard that the big man had fled, feigning ignorance. I learned that there had been a police incident before I arrived, and to avoid burdening my exhausted mother-in-law, I sat down and called the doctor to ask the details. But luckily enough, she hadn't fractured her hip, but rather the part of her back close to it. She would need to be hospitalized for a bit, but I was told she would be fine with physical therapy after that. This brought me some relief. Hey, I hate to ask, but could you go to the hospital and take care of Mom for a while? My husband said as soon as he came home. I had already informed about the severity of the injury and doctor's advice to him over the phone. I sighed at the sound of his voice, which didn't seem apologetic at all even as he said sorry. But you'll at least visit her, right? I asked my husband, who always made plans to go out on Saturdays and Sundays, but he let out an exaggerated sigh and said, No, I got plans on the weekends. I've been invited to play golf and drink by my boss. I can't say no to that. I was so shocked that I couldn't say a word. But she's your mother. As I said this, my husband just said with a faint smile, So what? My job comes first. I leave everything to you. Oh, and I've already eaten. With that, he stripped off his suit and headed for the bathroom. It was his usual routine, but I thought this was too strange, even for him. He often ate dinner before coming home, but his boss couldn't be so terrible as to prevent him from even paying a visit. At the moment, I made up my mind, but not yet. The real challenge was still ahead. I decided to take a leave of absence from work due to needing to prepare for things like changing clothes, since the hospitalization would last about a month. My director gave me his approval willingly, and so a month passed. In the end, my husband didn't visit even once. I didn't feel angry anymore. I was just tired of my husband. That was 2 days before her discharge. It's about Mom. When I asked him what he meant, my husband unilaterally continued the conversation. After her discharge, I was to take care of her, and to do that, I would have to live with my mother-in-law in her house. All of this was up to me, and since he didn't know when he would return, he would have to keep our rented apartment as it is. Since my mother-in-law still needed physical therapy and nursing care, I decided to extend my leave of absence. Although the number of children to take care of increasing during the summer vacation, my director kindly said, please manage it properly. While my mother-in-law was now able to sit up in bed, she still needed help from others. That is, if she was left alone, she would become bedridden. I rented a remote control electric reclining bed for my mother-in-law's room, bought a bouquet the next day, and went to pick up my mother-in-law who was being discharged. My mother-in-law was very pleased to receive the bouquet and thanked me many times. My husband didn't come. I knew why, but I didn't do anything for now. Doing all the housework and caring for my mother-in-law was hard but not painful. I found it heartwarming to see her gradually recovering. I had been living in my mother-in-law's house for 3 months. It was around the time when her health started to improve. My husband, who hadn't provided any care to his biological mother for those 3 months, instead often being madly running off to our rental house, was now in good spirits. Next to him was a large black suitcase. Where are you planning to go? Even though I already knew the answer, yet I dared to ask. It's Hawaii, baby. Gotta burn through some PDO. I'll be there for a week. I married you for the caregiving, so I'm counting on ya. As he left, looking down on me, he picked up his large suitcase, opened the front door, and left. He cheerfully left his bedridden mother and me behind, headed off to Hawaii. How could he leave his own mother, who needs care, and go on a trip? He's always been a man without much empathy, but this was just too much. It left me speechless. I will make him suffer. That's when my mother-in-law, smiling, rose to her feet. Well, let's go ourselves. I was so surprised to see her suddenly stand up that I couldn't react properly. Where to? I asked in return. She said with a sparkling smile, to our new home. My mother-in-law said it with a carefree tone. However, I was more concerned about her injury. Mother-in-law, when were you able to get out of bed? I was bored being alone, so I started doing physical therapy. There's nothing wrong with my bones anymore. I'm sorry for keeping it a secret. I just wanted to surprise you. My mother-in-law laughed cheerfully. My vibrant mother-in-law was back. However, I was still in a state of confusion. I'm glad to see you standing, but a new home? When I asked, my mother-in-law responded in a bright voice. Yes, let's get everything moved while he's gone. Don't worry, I had a modern house built just 3 stations away. We can move with just 1 phone call. Then my mother-in-law told me something unexpected. She had received a large sum of money from the insurance after my father-in-law, who had passed away in a car accident. A friend she met at daycare had offered to rent this house. I didn't think this house, as small and old as it is, was enough to leave to you. She said the new house was barrier-free, considering our old age. It was already around the time I got injured, and while I was deciding when to move, this whole situation came about. But my mother-in-law continued. Now I can repay you for your kindness. Let's quickly call the movers and get this done. She chuckled, and I couldn't help but smile too. We rented a wheelchair for my mother-in-law, who could stand but still found walking difficult. We took a medical transport taxi and headed to our new home. The new home looked like a church, complete with a yard. It was a 2-story, stand-alone house. That day, we asked the movers to transfer everything except my husband's personal belongings. Setting up little things like plates was one thing, but getting the larger pieces like wardrobes places correctly, and then just turning on the electricity and gas was another. My mother-in-law had quickly arranged it all over the phone. Susan, thank you so much. Out of the blue, she said this to me as we were settled down, eating takeout. Oh no, you don't need to thank me, what she said next took me by surprise. It's alright, I know everything. It seems like we ended up hiring the same private investigator. Suddenly, it clicked. I realized she knew that I knew why my husband had gone to Hawaii. You knew? She nodded sadly. Well, I am his mother, after all. I knew something was off. Now, what should we do? I had made up my mind. Let's decide when he returns from Hawaii. A week had passed since my husband left for Hawaii. My cell phone rang, notifying me of a call from my husband. As I expected, I thought to myself and picked up the phone. Hey, what's going on? I can open the house and no one's answering the doorbell. Where are you? I inadvertently grimaced at his loud voice. The house keys have been changed for the new resident. Your belongings are at your place. Hearing this, my husband shouted in frustration. What? What's happening? I patiently explained to my clueless husband. Your mother's house is hers, not yours, and the only house under your name is rented apartment. So, even though it was hassle, I moved all your stuff to the apartment. As expected, my husband blew up. What's with your attitude? Where are you? At the apartment? I let out a sigh. I can't tell you where I am. Your things are packed in suitcase. So why don't you go back to the apartment quickly and maybe call your mistress? Suddenly, my husband was flustered. What? How do you? I sighed again. Reflect on your actions. I had a private investigator look into it because I was suspicious. I'm prepared for divorce. Wait, let me at least talk to ma'am. Mother-in-law, John would like to talk to you. What do you think? I turned to my mother-in-law sitting on the bed. May I borrow your phone for a moment? My mother-in-law said this with a smile, so I handed over my cell phone with a smile too. Oh, Mom, come on, you're kidding, right? Enough with the jokes. My mother-in-law said, pretending to be surprised. Are you still saying such things? Even after having an affair? Don't you have any shame? It seems like I may have gone wrong in bringing you up. Everything Susan is saying is correct. There is nothing more to add. After saying that, she handed the phone back to me, still smiling, and added, If you have something to say, go ahead. I'm sorry. It seems like I read him not properly, so it led to you marrying such a foolish and overly optimistic person. My mother-in-law spoke loudly, making sure the voice could be heard on the other end of the phone. Well, that's how it is. She unilaterally hung up the phone and turned it off for now. We are now in our long-awaited new home. We had just finished the morning chores and were having a casual conversation with my mother-in-law. Her room was the spacious garden view room. My room was on the second floor. The living room and kitchen were on the first floor. I opened my cell phone on the small shelf, and finally, my mind settled and laughter welled up within me. My mother-in-law was also smiling warmly and kindly. It felt good. Now, how did we end up in this situation? Well, believe it or not, my mother-in-law was also using the same private investigation agency to investigate my husband's whereabouts. The reason the agency didn't inform us was because they had a strict confidentiality obligation towards the client, and it was effective within families, so they couldn't say anything. My resourceful and energetic mother-in-law had been skillfully using the phone while doing physical therapy on her bed. Her proactive nature was truly admirable. It turned out that my husband had been cheating for quite some time. Furthermore, his outings with his boss were actually visits to strip clubs. His affair partner was a woman from one of their business partners. Apparently, he approached her himself while she was working as a salesperson. It's such a ridiculous story. I wish I could return all the time I spent living with such a person. That's why I intended to hire a lawyer and get a divorce. It might make my husband happy as well. He can fully indulge in his beloved saleswoman. It remains to be seen what will happen when his facade crumbled. A few days later, please, don't divorce me. I've never seen my husband so pathetic before. When I went to the apartment to pick up some of my stuff, he suddenly appeared and apologized. Why? You have someone else, don't you? I naturally replied. In response, my husband burst into tears. He can't handle doing household chores on his own. His affair with the saleswoman was purely a way to fulfill his desires, and he never thought of marrying her seriously. And above all, my mother-in-law said she wants to save her toys with him when he got divorced. Those factors have piled up, and it seems like my husband is at his wit's end. Honestly, I couldn't care less about what happened with his affair partner, and I don't have even a tiny bit of love or sympathy left for my husband. And there's one more thing. If we get divorced, my mother-in-law has offered to adopt me. Apparently, it's her way of repairing me. I was delighted by the idea because I love my mother-in-law, but it also puzzled me since we don't have any grandchildren. Nevertheless, my mother-in-law strongly urged me to go through with the adoption. One reason is that she wants to live together, but there's also an underlying motive. She wants to transfer all her inheritance to me because she feels responsible for the trouble her incompetent son caused. My mother-in-law is seriously intent on severing ties with her son, so I must also face this situation seriously. To be honest, I was truly happy about it. When she proposed the adoption, I even cried at first, having lost my parents at a young age and been betrayed by my husband. My mother-in-law's smile was my only solace. You are getting what you deserve for neglecting your mother-in-law. Now you have no choice but to be alone, I said coldly. Can I at least talk to my mom? My mother-in-law has no intention of talking to you anymore. If you keep insisting, I'll call the police. What will you do? Upon hearing this, my husband burst into tears while making sounds. I looked at his face expressionlessly. Since the discussion with my husband didn't go well, we ended up hiring a lawyer and leaving into the family court. The result was, of course, in my favor. Thanks to his infidelity and visits to strip clubs, I was able to divorce him smoothly, even though he argued. Although my savings, which I have planned to use for building a house someday, were halved in the division of assets, I don't mind. My mother-in-law's condition has been steadily improving, and by the time the trial was over, she had fully recovered and even resumed her works. Today, we are celebrating the completion of the adoption process by dining at the fancy restaurant. Having a meal while chatting happily truly brings me happiness, and I am thrilled that she treats me not only as a real daughter, but even more affectionately. In the future, it's likely that I will need to provide constant care for my mother-in-law, but I have no complaints. In any case, my mother-in-law seems to have truly had enough of my ex-husband, so she decided to break off relations with her son and never meet again. I had already had the lawyer prepare a document for severing ties when the time came, and to ensure that I didn't receive any phone calls from my ex-husband. My mother-in-law had set up call rejection for his calls. By request, I did it for her. By the way, I heard from a former co-worker the other day. My mother-in-law is waiting with a gentle smile for the construction. John seems to be unable to pay the rent and utilities on his own, so he borrows money from his boss every month. My mother-in-law covered her mouth with her hand. Oh dear, I feel sorry for him. That's right, I said with a smile. He has borrowed money from various financial institutions as well. The reason for the divorce has leaked through my friends, and it seems that he is not respected by his superiors, and the story of infidelity had spread, making him feel uncomfortable at work. It's quite satisfying. While it is said that one should not take pleasure in the misfortunes of others, I used to believe that it didn't apply to me. But now, it's different. When it comes to my ex-husband, the misfortunes of others are indeed sweet. While enjoying a fancy dinner, I wished for further misfortune upon my ex-husband.
It's such a headache dealing with my father-in-law. When sales are low, I punish him by skipping his meal. My sister-in-law, Yvonne, blurted out. She drives her father to work from dawn till dusk and even withholds his dinner. My brother simply chuckled at this, unfazed by her harsh words. Poor old man.
I'll take him in,
I offered.
Great. I'll be relieved to be rid of that deadbeat.
With these words echoing behind us, my family and I began a life under the same roof with my father. As it turned out, my father was a god of fortune in disguise. My name is Sally. A 33-year-old part-time working mom with a husband and a daughter who is a kindergartner. My husband recently took over his father's business, running a small diner. Ever since he was a child, he looked up to his father, who would start working early in the morning and serve piping hot meals with sweat pouring down his face. He once told me that his father was even more of a hero than any football player or superhero.
The steam dancing around Dad as he cooked was just magical. I swear he was dancing with the food goddess.
This remark made me question his sanity. But I too saw at the moment I tasted my father-in-law's cooking. It was as if he was indeed dancing with a food goddess. We were somewhat of a weird couple. We got married in our mid-20s. And were blessed with a daughter a few years later. Those were probably our happiest days. However, not long after our daughter was born, my father-in-law fell ill and passed away. His absence was a huge blow to my husband, who had already lost his mother. He even considered closing down the restaurant. But his staff and regular customers encouraged him.
You're the only one who can carry on his legacy. We want that taste to remain. Only you can do that.
Their words inspired my husband, and so he decided to face the challenge, hoping his father would watch over him from the afterlife. However, things were not smooth from the start. Even if he managed to replicate the taste, customers compared him to his father. In other words, he had to surpass his father to be truly recognized. Although he had taken over the business, it didn't pick up as expected and my husband was troubled. Then, another tragedy struck. My mother passed away. I was worried about leaving my grieving father alone, but the 1-hour drive made it difficult to visit him regularly. Seeing my concern, my brother offered to move in with my father. I was grateful, but also had mixed feelings. My brother has always been a bit careless. After all, his favorite phrase is "everything will be all right, believe it or not." My brother was always a bit irresponsible. Adding to my worries was my sister-in-law, Yvonne.
Oh, your husband's a high school dropout? Unbelievable.
She casually tossed at us when we first met. She would openly belittle me. A part-timer? You're a loser as a woman. And they even did not attend my mother's funeral. Apparently, my brother had quit his job to start a cafe and claimed he was too busy. When did you learn to run a cafe? I asked, to which he nonchalantly replied.
I used to skip work and hang out at cafes. Thought it'd be fun to run one.
This almost made me faint. And now, since they moved in with my father, they've started making him help out at the cafe. And they make him work all for free. When I asked her, "What about you, Yvonne? Shouldn't you be the one helping out first?" She replied, "Nah, I don't work. A man's gotta support his wife, right? What on earth is nah?" She can't even be bothered to include the T in not, that lazy woman. What could my brother possibly see in her that he willingly supports her? Then, one day, we decided to visit our family home on a rare day off. Despite informing my brother ahead of time, only Yvonne was at the house when we arrived. "Hello, Yvonne, it's been a while." Yeah, come on in. Make yourself at home. I'll just be watching TV. Yvonne was as insufferable as always. Where's my brother?" "Oh, he said something about sales being down this month, so he decided to open the shop." "Oh, I see." I was taken aback. "Well, it's actually more comfortable without him around," she added. I was shocked not only by my brother's sudden decision to work, but also by Yvonne's attitude. Who says they're better off without their spouse, especially in front of their spouse's sister? I walked into the living room, but no one was there. I thought maybe Dad was in his room, so I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. When I opened the door quietly and peered inside, I was lost for words. I was lost for words. There was no trace of my father's room. Instead, there was a room painted in an obnoxiously bright pink color. It was so pink that it made my eyes hurt. Yvonne, Dad's room looks strange. Could he possibly have dementia? I rushed back to the living room and asked Yvonne, but she was lounging on the sofa, engrossed in the TV. "Oh, don't worry about it. That's my room now," she said dismissively. "But that used to be Dad's study. It was a waste of space, so I got rid of it. Books don't do anything for you." "Got rid of it?" "And I made it into my room. Isn't it cute, all pink?" I didn't say anything about her taste, but I couldn't stay silent about my father. "Doesn't my brother have a room with you?" "Yeah, we got the biggest room. But I wanted a room just for me. So, my old room." "Oh, that's my storage room. I've been collecting stuff since I was single, and that's where I keep it all." In a panic, I swung open the door of my old room, and was greeted by more blinding pink. How much does she love pink?
Mom, it's so pink.
My daughter, who had come to peek into the room with me, commented with wide eyes. Even for a little girl, who usually loves pink, this was too much. That was how much pink there was in my old room. A mountain of boxes stacked up to the ceiling. And pink merchandise covered every inch of the room. I wondered if the floor would give out. But right now, I had more pressing concerns. I hurried back to the living room and confronted Yvonne, who was clutching a pink cushion. "Where is Dad's room?" My father's study and my old room had been taken over by pink, and the big room was occupied by my brother and his wife. This house only has 3 rooms, excluding the living room and kitchen. It used to be my parents' room, my brother's room, and my room. By the way, since my brother moved out, his room became my father's study. I wonder where my dad sleeps. I thought he must have converted his study into a bedroom. To my surprise, Yvonne said to me, "He sleeps on this couch," as she casually dropped cookie crumbs all over the couch.
"What?"
As I was at a loss for words, I heard some commotion at the front door. Upon heading there, I found my father, his face pale, standing with the aid of my brother.
"Dad, what on earth happened?"
I questioned my brother as I supported my father, who looked like he was about to collapse. But my brother just shrugged and said nonchalantly, "He collapsed while helping at the shop."
"He collapsed? What about the hospital?"
"It's too much hassle."
"Huh?
"Hospitals are just a waste of money. If you're free, can you help me out at the shop?"
"Who's gonna help you, you dimwit? Get your wife to work first."
I found myself shouting before rushing to take my father to the hospital. After returning home, I confronted my brother and his wife.
"He's been diagnosed with overwork. How much have you been making Dad work?"
That's right, my father had collapsed from overwork. My dad is now lying on the couch. It's pitiful to see he doesn't even have a proper bed. As my face turned red with anger, my brother and his wife were still grinning. "It's not a big deal. We just had him get up at 3 a.m. to prepare for opening the shop, then he serves customers. In between, he does dishes and cleaning. And after 8 p.m., he closes the shop. Are you a demon or something? Even prisoners get breaks." The anger kept building due to their atrocious behavior. But my brother didn't seem to understand why I was upset. "We're letting him live with us, so it's only right that he helps us out." As I was at a loss for words, my sister-in-law nodded in agreement. "That's right. We're having difficulties because he's not being useful. On days when sales are down, we punish him by skipping his meals. He still doesn't seem to get it though. Oh, of course, he won't get a meal today neither." "What? Hold on. What did you just say? Punishment for not being useful? Skipping meals? This can't be real." The father I hadn't seen in a while was physically and emotionally worn out. With such outrageous behavior, I was so angry I couldn't find the words to speak. Well, now you know, sister, so you can take him. Here. I didn't quite understand what my sister-in-law was saying, and as I was tilting my head in confusion, a duffel bag was placed in front of me. What's this? This is all your father's belongings. Wait, this is all of Dad's stuff? That's right. No way, that can't be true. My dad, who had always lived in this house, only has this one duffel bag of belongings. I couldn't believe it and looked at my brother, who was smirking and nodding. Is this really all he has? So, we're gonna have the useless one leave. What? My sister-in-law's words left me speechless, and my brother agreed. Yeah, it's troublesome to live with him any longer. Since he's not useful, you should take him in, sis. Just as I was about to explode with anger at their outrageous behavior, a cheerful voice echoed throughout the room.
Huh, Grandpa's coming to live with us? Yay!
My daughter, who had been occupied by my husband, had surprisingly been listening to the conversation. Confused, I asked my daughter, "Do you want to live with Grandpa?"
Yes, I want to live with Grandpa.
She's just a little girl. She probably doesn't fully understand the situation, but her words gave me the push I needed. I looked at my husband, who was holding our daughter. Honey. He must have understood what I was trying to say. He quietly nodded and said, "Yes, let's do that. Let's take in your father." Thank you. Our family is by no means wealthy. Our ramen shop business isn't going well, and my part-time job doesn't bring in much income. Our lives will definitely become tougher. Still, I can't bear to leave my father in his current state any longer. Dad. I gently spoke to my father, who was lying down. Let's go home together. As I said this, my father, with barely opened eyes, said, "Thank you. It feels great to finally get rid of the dead weight." My sister-in-law threw these words at us as we were leaving. Ignoring her harsh words, we took my father and went home. I was filled with anger and regret. I was upset about losing my childhood home, and even more upset with myself for trusting my brother. I'm sorry, Dad. I had no idea that my brother would turn out this way. Even though my brother has always been irresponsible, he used to be better. Sure, he had his rebellious phase where he clashed with our parents, but I never thought he'd stoop this low. However, my father shook his head with a feeble smile. Don't worry about it. It's my responsibility for raising him to be this way. And I was the one who pushed myself too hard in order to help my son. I couldn't hold back my tears at my father's kindness and said, "You don't have to work anymore. We don't have much to spare, so we can't afford luxuries, but you can rest. I can't take on more shifts at my part-time job because I still have my toddler daughter. But once she enters elementary school, I'll increase my hours. If possible, I'll even aim to become a full-time employee. There's so much more I can do for my father and my family. I'm gonna work hard. Thank you." My father smiled warmly at me as I clenched my fist. For a while after that, we had peaceful days. My father regained his health thanks to the much-needed rest. He now spends time with my daughter. My daughter is thrilled to be living with her beloved grandpa. Even though life was hard, I had no regrets about bringing my father into our home. He tried to give us his pension to help with our expenses, but I refused. Apparently, my father doesn't have much savings left. Apparently, my younger brother and his wife had been seriously milking him for money for living expenses. What's that about? I guess that's why he said he was worthless, because he'd been drained to the point of destitution. Really a ridiculous couple. Days continued to pass peacefully, but gradually changes began to appear. The changes came to my husband. Specifically, they came to my husband's restaurant. Lately, we've been getting a lot of customers. My husband muttered one day.
Really? That's a good thing, isn't it?
Well, yes, but... The hesitation in my husband's voice makes me tilt my head. It's great if your business is doing well, right? I think the taste has improved because I'm constantly researching, but I feel like there's something more to it than just that. What do you mean? I don't know. I have no involvement in the store, so if my husband, the owner, doesn't know, there's no way I can know. I wonder what it is. The conversation ended there, and I told my father. Dad, I've got a part-time job tomorrow morning. Can you have lunch at the restaurant? Sure thing. My father, who is fully recovered, still has a healthy appetite. On days when I can't prepare lunch, he eats at my husband's restaurant. My husband seems to be considerate and tries not to make the meals too greasy, but my father seems to really like the original taste. And he's even paying for his meals. Even if I refuse many times, he won't listen, saying, "It's not good to mix business and personal matters. If you're proud of what you're making, you should accept the payment properly." So now my husband seems to accept the payment without arguing. And then the next day, my husband came home when I was putting our daughter to bed, and as soon as he entered the door, he shouted,
I figured it out!
"What have you figured out?"
The reason why the restaurant is thriving.
"What was it?"
Well, that person did this and did that.
"What's the result of all that?"
Hey, speak clearly.
"You too. Let's both calm down for a moment." He seemed to calm down after gulping down the cold tea I had brought him. Sitting on the sofa, my husband began to talk about what had happened that day. "Today, in the afternoon when the restaurant was less busy, your father came in. And as soon as he came in, people started gathering around him." "Huh? Your father is a god of fortune." "What? What are you talking about?" "My father is just an old man." My husband continues. "I asked some of the regulars. Yeah. Apparently, they really like your father's life advice." "What?" "I was always too busy with food preparation and cooking to notice, but it seems that your father has been answering the customers' life questions." "What's all this about?" Apparently, the story goes something like this. My father had become a familiar face to the customers because he frequently visited my husband's restaurant. In fact, my father is a retired teacher and has a way with words that carries quite some relevance. By chance, a certain white-collar worker once shared his complaints with my dad. My father, while eating his meal, advised him, and apparently the man made a successful career progression after that. Huh? And hearing this story, a part-time worker asked to have a lunch with your father for consultation. They talked while eating our chili bean stew, and thanks to his advice, this part-time worker was able to become a full-time employee at the company he wanted to work at. Really? Another female customer shared her relationship issues with her unfaithful boyfriend over hot sandwiches with him. Okay. Now she's the wife of an Arab oil tycoon. You're kidding, right? Well, actually, she ended up happily together with a new boyfriend. A legend was born that consulting with my father while eating our menu leads to a turning point in life. What is this person even talking about? I cast a skeptical glance at my husband who's feeding me this dubious information. Just then, my freshly bathed father appeared and I decided to ask him directly. Hey, Dad. Did you give advice to anyone today? Oh, well, I guess so. Perhaps because I'm getting on in years, people find it easier to talk to me. What did they talk about today? Let's see, a troubled father of a shut-in son, and a university student who was about to be held back a year for failing a course. You're kidding me. Apparently he's been giving advice, that much seems certain. Based on what he said, I didn't see how either of those situations could be easily resolved. I went to bed that night still half doubting the whole thing. But then, a few days later, "I've got the investigation results," said my husband with a solemn look on his face. "All right, I'll listen to your urban legend." "What is it?" "The father of the shut-in son whom my dad gave advice to the other day said his son has started going out and even got a part-time job. He was in tears when he came to tell us." "Really?" "He said he talked it out with his son exactly as father suggested. And then there's the university student who was supposed to repeat a year. Well, if the decision's been made, he can't do much about repeating a year. Maybe he regained his spirits and got motivated again? He was able to move on to the next grade. What the hell?" Apparently, he had failed a course taught by a very strict professor, which was causing him to repeat a year. But he went to the professor's office, passionately argued his case, and in the end, his paper was accepted and he happily advanced to the next grade.
That can't be.
I never went to college, let alone high school, so I'm not sure, but isn't that how college works?
Well, whether it's accepted or not depends on the professor, I guess.
And so, my father's reputation skyrocketed. By the way, there was a guy who came just to seek advice without ordering anything.
How rude! To sit in the shop without ordering anything, he must have nerves of steel.
Well, your father didn't really give this guy any substantial advice. It seems the guy's situation ended up even more dire. So, in other words,
yeah, he is amazing.
No, not that. It's not your cooking that's getting the rave reviews.
You really had to say that?
Hearing the harsh truth, my husband looked utterly dejected. But I mean, if the food wasn't good, they would just order the cheapest dish or just a drink. Since they're ordering properly, it must taste decent, right? At least decent. Regardless of the reason, my husband's shop began to thrive. Of course, customers continue to come even when my father isn't there, so it must mean the food is good, right? Good job, honey. Just as everything was going well, an unexpected event occurred. A storm has arrived. Namely, my younger brother and his wife. This happened by chance when I took a day off from my part-time job and went with my dad to my husband's restaurant. Despite the fact it was before opening hours, the door abruptly swung open, and someone yelled,
"Give me back my dad!"
as they stormed in. My brother confronted me, venting with raw anger.
I saw it online. Your business is booming because of Dad's life counseling. Even when Dad helped at my place, our sales were terrible, and now we're almost going under. What's with this difference?
He demanded. You were pushing all the work onto Dad, how could he give life advice while busy with that? I retorted. Struck by my words, my brother faltered. At that moment, his wife stepped forward, pushing him aside. We won't make him work anymore. He just needs to sit and give life advice. Look, my father-in-law would prefer to live in his own home, right? We came to pick him up, so let's go home. She said assertively. How unreasonable. They practically threw him out and now they have the nerve to turn the tables like this. It's outrageous. As if we'd ever hand Dad over to those two devils. As I was about to respond in kind, it was my dad who stopped me. He put his hand out in front of me, indicating I should hold back. He then moved to stand in front of my brother and his wife, who were now silent. Dad spoke quietly. I understand what you've asked for. If things continue like this, your restaurant will surely go under. So, you should give life advice in our restaurant. My brother started. Let me be clear. Dad interrupted. Those who come for advice primarily want to eat at this restaurant. But your place, a cafe? It's no good, absolutely no good.
But that's not.
My brother tried to argue. It's true. Dad continued. Did you ever train anywhere to learn how to brew coffee? We thought we could manage by watching some online tutorials. My brother replied sheepishly. Yeah, that much is clear. Your desserts, like the cakes, are also pretty dreadful. It's no wonder sales are dropping and you're on the brink of closure. But, stunned by Dad's critiques, my brother fell silent. He tried to argue, but couldn't find the words.
Don't disrespect your work.
Dad chided him. Yes. My brother replied, crestfallen. How can you expect to have any customers if you're this casual about everything? Conversations are based on customers coming to enjoy a good meal. No one would come to your place since it's so dreadful. Dad stated. The statement must have been spot on. My brother was at a loss for words.
Nobody would come for life advice either. Go back to basics and train properly. I won't lend a hand to you two, who take everything for granted.
He scolded them. With my brother and his wife not being able to reply, Dad shouted once more.
Don't disrespect your work.
After that, my brother and his wife left, unable to keep up with my father's momentum. It turned out that they left after talking to Dad without eating anything at my husband's restaurant. So, what happens next? Well, they say that giving advice without any food makes things even worse, right? It seemed that my brother's restaurant closed down without much ado. The debt they incurred when opening the place not only remained unpaid, but continued to pile up beyond their capacity to repay. My dad, in his kindness, gifted them our old family home as a parting gift, but even selling that couldn't cover their debt. It seems they're now living a life of extreme poverty in a rundown apartment. It turns out that not only my brother, but his wife, too, were in debt. I can only imagine the hardship those two debt-ridden souls must be going through. In contrast, my family and I are leading a prosperous life. My husband's restaurant is thriving, and I've quit my part-time job to help him out. It's pretty tough, but it's a joy to see my husband working so hard up close. Our spry dad helps us out by taking care of our daughter when we're busy. He doesn't give life advice much anymore, but customers still come, which makes us really happy because it means my husband's efforts are being recognized. Today, my husband is again cooking expertly in every ways. And when he cooks, the steam dances up, joining in a dance with the goddess of food.